Shout out to our sponsors at IconBet. Open source, decentralized gaming, no deposits, play straight from your wallet. IconBet, made by the players, for the players. Eye on Icon is proudly supported by Icon Nation and the Icon community. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Eye on Icon. This is the episode where we cover the weekly news, so let's dive right in. Icongrapher, how are you today?
I'm doing pretty well. I'm pretty pumped up about some of the news we got this week, especially as it relates to ICE, which we'll be obviously going into a little bit later. But also we had that really good conversation on Twitter Spaces with Scott and the Balanced team, both about ICE and Balanced. Just a lot of good stuff already this week. It's only halfway through, give or take. So we'll obviously go into all that a bit later, but certainly nice. The market's been just kind of treading water lately, which is it's not as fun as when it was going up, but it's not as terrifying as when it's going down. It does just get kind of boring. So the fact that we got some really meaty news to talk about and learn about and everything like that kind of made it so watching stagnant charts wasn't as bad as it could have been. So that was certainly positive.
Totally. Look, I actually, a bit of a personal milestone, Icongrapher, for us. We're 35 episodes into this show.
Oh wow.
Yeah, you never thought, huh? I just realised.
Yeah, time flies.
Yes. No, look, certainly a week of excitement. Some big news drop. Didn't expect it. Ice, that was a surprise and a good little surprise. So I think let's start talking about it, Icongrapher. You've written another fantastic article that breaks down quite a lot and how it will actually aid the ecosystem. I'll throw it over to you.
Yeah, so well, Icon came out with their tweet thread. I think it was 18 tweets. And I have notifications set up on my phone, so it's kind of whenever Icon tweets something, I can see it almost immediately if I'm paying attention at least. So I was just kind of quickly skimming through it and then just kind of randomly retweeting certain things that I got super excited about. And so I had to revisit a few times just to kind of fully digest it and understand what was going on. Basically every single tweet in that little tweet thread is bullish on its own terms for the most part. Obviously, they fold into the larger context of ICE and everything like that. But I was kind of going through that, and it's kind of like, all right, it took me a while to kind of piece this together and realize the significance of it. And I said, okay, well, if I can kind of take what I've learned and write it up for the community at large, so they can kind of get a better understanding of it as well. Just because there was a lot of confusion off the bat, kind of, oh, is this a fork, is this a rebranding, kind of what is this? I would encourage you to go read that article. It's a little long, but certainly you can probably knock it out in 5 to 10 minutes or so, depending on how fast you can read. But essentially, to kind of cut to the chase, from the get-go, if you bought into Icon in 2017, after the ICO or around the ICO or ICO, you did it because the whole premise of Icon was, oh, we're going to connect all these blockchains, which at the time was a pretty novel idea. Back in those days, it was kind of, you had Bitcoin, you had Ethereum, you had Litecoin, and you had, Ripple had been around for a while too. And obviously Ethereum had smart contracts, but they're all just kind of, each blockchain was just kind of the same. Obviously Bitcoin had more support and more history than Litecoin and Ripple and everything like that. But of course you had all these dozens of other projects. But the thing with most of those is they had just launched, just during that kind of ICO boom. And a lot of them were specialized and we're going to do unique things. But even just the idea of, if you were to say, hey, we can get Bitcoin onto Ethereum, that was, a groundbreaking idea at the time. Looking back at how much everything's evolved now, that's kind of a pretty basic thing. And it's basically been done to a certain extent with wrapped Bitcoin. But, as time evolved, Icon kind of took I don't want to say a different approach. They kind of expanded their vision and they realized that, hey, these blockchains, they're not just spreadsheets that you can use to do transactions. They're becoming more than that, to where each one has its own community. They have their own different governance structures. They have their own different economic structures. Icon offers, for their governance, they offer X% or, 11% versus others that may offer 5%. They offer, each one has different transaction fees. Each one has different economic incentives and models and everything like that. And they all obviously have different different communities, and they're all made up of all these dApps, which are, you can call them dApps. In certain cases, you can call them DAOs, depending on how they evolve, and which are basically, the analogy they use is essentially they're companies within a nation, right? And these blockchains each being their own digital nation, where it had evolved so much more beyond just, this spreadsheet that could do transactions in a protected, uh, distributed kind of manner. So, throughout this whole time, the whole idea was hyperconnect the world, but I think it became, the initial premise was, hey, it'd be cool if a hospital could talk to an insurance company, right? That was the original premise kind of behind that, interconnectivity, hyper interoperability, hyperconnect the world kind of thing. It was more kind of pitched at an institutional kind of level, and that's what got people excited. It was like, oh wow, Samsung's going to use this, or all these hospitals are going to use it, and the MyID Alliance, the fact that it's still growing, the fact that it's still around, the fact that it's still working, shows that to a certain extent that vision is still in place, but it's actually grown beyond that to where we realize that, hey, there's always these little mini worlds that need to be connected. So that all kind of brings us to today, where we have BTP, which is if by now, if you listen to this podcast, if you've been following Icon, you're more aware of it, and you're certainly very well aware of it. It's basically Icon's core technological, foundational, clear use case. It's something they've been working on for a very, very long time. As far as I can tell, and as far as what smarter people like Scott have told me, it's basically exceedingly unique in the blockchain space, just based on its design and the various trade-offs, and limited trade-offs that there really are, and minimal limitations. And the experience of actually using it is going to be essentially seamless. On other chains, you have to bridge stuff across, and it takes 15 minutes, and it costs probably a chunk of Ethereum or whatever fees you're potentially paying. And it doesn't quite, it's not very frictionless. Whereas BTP, just the way it's set up, it's going to be, almost like your everything, even though it's going chain to chain to chain, almost feels like it's moving on the same blockchain, at least as far as I understand it. So what they realized is, we have Icon 2.0, which is written in Java, which is a programming language, of course. And I think part of it is, they realize that there's a lot of developers out there who know Ethereum really well, just because Ethereum had a first mover advantage, and it became, other than Bitcoin, basically the go-to destination. And so there's a lot of familiarity with Ethereum, but the problem is Icon itself, as it is right now, is written in Python. It has a score architecture that's kind of unique to Icon, that takes a bit of learning to get around and get a hold of. It's very powerful and works really well, but it just takes a little bit extra learning. And so what they realized is, okay, over time, Icon's grown beyond this kind of the original interoperability thing, into this actual digital nation. We're cultivating all these applications to be built, and doing all these things that aren't hyperconnectivity. What if we create a new network, a new blockchain that is, it's associated with, we'll call it Icon Core, which is our current, the current iteration of Icon that we know and love. What if we do that and make it what's called EVM compatible? EVM stands for Ethereum Virtual Machine, which is essentially, what it basically means is that everything's written in the same programming language as Ethereum is, which is Solidity. It also provides a lot of access to the tools, software tools that Ethereum has access to, such as MetaMask being a good example of that. And so it basically creates an environment that is almost identical to being able to code and write and develop on Ethereum, except it does it on this new separate network, in this case called ICE. So what the advantages of that is it's really easy to lure developers who have Ethereum experience or EVM compatible blockchain development experience, which there are a lot of. So it makes it easier to bring talent over. It also, I think the best analogy is, balanced, because it had to be written in Python. They essentially had to start from scratch. That's why it took about 18 months to get done. That's why, there's all sorts of testing, all sorts of audits, it basically starting literally from zero. On an EVM situation, they could have literally they could have looked at the contract code for Maker, which is very similar to Balanced. They could have literally copied and pasted it, and basically had, a functional program up and running within minutes or hours. Obviously, you don't want to rip something off entirely, but what it could have been done is they could have taken that code and then, reconfigured it based on what their design vision was, And instead of having to take 18 months to do that, maybe it only takes 1 month because you're already building with something that's pretty much done and you're just kind of tweaking it and everything like that. So you can see how it'd be easier to really, really rapidly develop new things. And again, you're not having to start from scratch. So it made sense for them to say, hey, let's create this new environment, this new network where it's really, really easy to build stuff. Meanwhile, we can make it so Icon 2.0 is really, really hyper focused on BTP itself. And this is something, in our Twitter Spaces chat that we really kind of talked about a little bit was, being able to separate the two. It allows you to maximize the features of both, in the sense that, now the Icon core team, their sole focus is how do we maximize this chain to achieve BTP in the most efficient, cheap, secure, whatever it is kind of way. Whereas those who are going to be helping, the team that's going to be built around ICE, how can we design our chain in order to maximize building applications, building DAOs, building out products and tools and things that people are going to want to use. So it creates a much more focused vision for both sides of things. Also, some people say, well, couldn't you just made Icon 2.0 EVM compatible and not having to create a new chain? Which is a legitimate question. And, basically in order to do that, they would have had to kind of reprogram Icon 2.0 in order to allow that EVM capability, which could have taken months, if not years, and a lot of resources and a lot of cost. So instead of doing that, again, it's basically, okay, let's just start a chain from scratch that's EVM compatible from the get-go. Doesn't sound like it's been too hard. It seems like they've gotten it done fairly quickly, and it should be ready to go, in a relatively quick sort of time frame. I think they mentioned launching it around or a little bit after Icon 2.0, which is sometime within this year, within a few months. So, obviously, ideally, you've got a good understanding of why this decision got made to split off into a separate chain. Now, each person who holds ICX at a 1-to-1 ratio, they'll be getting ICE. ICE will be the native token of the new ICE network, obviously. Its primary direct not sole purpose, but the initial use case will be paying transaction fees, which is essentially the same, any new blockchain network, the native token, that's basically step one as far as what it does. It's used to pay transaction fees. That's what ICX did in the early days of Icon, before there was governance and anything else. So if you have 1,000 ICX, you'll be getting 1,000 ICE, which you can use on the ICE network. ICX can be used for governance for both ICX and or ICE. And you can move it, if you want to do 50% on one, 50% on other, you can do it that way. You can kind of move it back and forth based on how you want to utilize that ICX. If you stake it on Icon, you still earn ICX as staking rewards. If you stake it on ICE, you will earn ICE. It was pointed out by Scott that ICE is not a staking token. So that's a use case that ICX has that ICE won't. That being said, obviously, if there's all sorts of dApps being built, and I've already heard whispers that there are a couple already in the plans, already being planned. So I'm sure we'll get more information on that in the coming weeks. Obviously, there's a lot of activity there. There's going to be demand for the ICE token in order to potentially be able to use those. And I think what's most important too is, it sounds like ICE won't be up and running until BTP is up and running, which means that moving ICX from one to the other, or moving ICE from one to the other, is going to be super easy and seamless because it'll be done with BTP. So it'll be I don't want to use the big brother, little brother analogy necessarily, but that's kind of how I see it. They're still both in the ICX Icon family. I think they'll be, ICE will be the first to integrate with Icon on a number of different levels, whether it's BTP or other kind of different ways they can connect and interact and everything like that. But overall, it's certainly a plus. Obviously, there's a lot of happiness about the airdrop. Airdrops always make everyone happy because it's, to a certain extent, free money. It's hard to tell how much value ICE will have from the get-go. It'll be its own, whenever there's brand new tokens like this, the price action could get funky, both good and bad. And we have essentially two networks that specialize in what they're supposed to do, rather than trying to do too many things at once. So I think hopefully by now people have a good understanding. There were a couple, so as you can tell, this isn't a fork. It's literally a whole new separate chain being created, just as so many other blockchains have been created over the years. Except it's, like I said, it's going to have a very, very strong connection with Icon as it exists right now. There's also a lot of questions about, hey, if I've got my ICX on balanced, You know, if it's been converted to SICX, will I be eligible for the airdrop? Scott has already indicated that they're going to figure out a way to make that work. Obviously, they have an incentive to make it work just because they don't want people pulling out all their SICX because they're concerned there's not going to be an airdrop and they're not going to receive the tokens. So if you were wondering about that, you should be covered there. Again, they don't have an exact plan at the moment, but he's pretty confident they'll figure something out one way or another. But beyond that, hopefully I kind of paint the picture for you there. Again, there's more detail in that article, but yeah, Fez, do you think I left anything out there?
No, I think you covered it all thoroughly. That's great. I think look, I'm excited. I shared this thought as well on the community call. At the moment we don't have much transactions, although they are climbing 180,000 at the moment from 90 regular. So that's a day. So that's a substantial climb in the last few weeks. But overall, it was more. You're going to get there, and then what? So once the chain is at its peak, what are we going to do? Start scrambling. So this is a great way that we are thinking ahead. I will be a bit of a critique here. One of the things I'm probably interested in getting a bit more details around is how the token supply will work. Is ICE going to be inflationary? What kind of mechanics are we going to put in place there to improve where ICX, I guess, isn't... Is there going to be variations to the way ICX works versus how ICE's overall inflation model works? So I'm interested in that. And the second part, again, being critical here is more, well, why should I build if I can build on Matic or various of the other side chains already connected to Ethereum? So, and this is something I've intentionally called out because it's something that I'm guessing the team have thought of and are going to start giving out reasons of why this is important. So essentially, BTP is connected through to Matic, BS Smart Chain. Not that these are all things I know. This is just me ranting a little bit. We've got all these chains we're connected to. So all of a sudden, well, they don't require to be going through ICE. That's the beauty of BTP. Once something is added to the ecosystem, the chains can just, send across to each other. So that'll be an interesting conversation / how the foundation plans to capture a bit of that market share and convince new builders to come and build on ICE. But on the flip side, what it's great is all the builders we have on Icon all of a sudden will be able to super speed their bills essentially because they could, see something, as he called out, Iconographer, just go, yep, that's working. Alchemix, for example, this awesome idea of you put in your stable coin, you take out half of that value as a loan, and it uses all your yield farming aggregators in the background to slowly pay down the loan you've taken. So it's a self-paying loan essentially. Now, to what everyone's been saying, if we were to create that on Icon currently, we'd build it from scratch, whereas with ICE it enables some of the teams to go, this is great, let me take this code across, let me tweak it, audit it. And this is the other perk of the matter. I am willing to bet this audit fund that Icon has set up and a few other things, the teams that build on Icon will benefit from this. So all of a sudden you've got this code. Maybe they've audited, who knows? But at least we know when it goes through some of our builders, they know that they have access to these awesome funds where, yep, copy the code, make the tweaks, get it audited, and it's kind of more secure and builds that trust for people to come across and use the ecosystem. So I think in a way I've self-answered that. However, it will be an interesting conversation because I don't see Matic and a few of those other Matic being a side chain at the moment, but once it integrates its layer 2 functionality, I don't envision them having scaling issues for a while. So it will be about the talent we can foster in the dev community to come and build across on our protocol. Apart from that, it's great. I actually like the idea. We needed something like this, and it's good that they haven't overcomplicated it. They've really assessed and said it would get too complicated to build it into Icon 2.0, and it's not the smartest of decisions. So it's good to have this chain connected up. Ice. Just, I keep typing, go to type ice, and it just types out as ICX.
Well, I think on your point with Matic, I think as thing, if even if we still had just if there was no such thing as ICE and it was still just Icon, if ultimately BTP still existed, I think you'd still have the same problem of okay, if they can build on Matic, why would they necessarily build on Icon? Which is kind of the question you're asking is, why would they build on Ice if they can kind of build on Matic? So it's to a certain extent it's still the same
But
problem.
yeah, and we haven't
Go ahead.
answered it in a way. Yeah. So
Right.
right,
And it's
right.
just, I mean, and it's the same problem that there's a bajillion projects out there, and they're all, from a tech standpoint, we're hitting, I think, kind of close to the ceiling here as far as kind of like it, one we've kind of figured out blockchain to a certain extent where one chain isn't all that nuts. Each one has its super super low transaction speeds. Each of them are fairly secure. Obviously, there's a little tweaks here and there, so it kind of comes down to who's fostered the best community, who's fostered the best development environment,
Mm,
all that other kind of good stuff. So it's the same, whether it's Matic, whether it's one of the bajillion other chains that have smart contracts that you can build on, that's always going to be a looming, I don't say problem, but something you'll have to address in terms of, hey, there's all these developers out there. How do we get them to build on our chain versus another chain? And obviously, Icon 2.0 and Icon itself have a lot of advantages. I'm curious if there's kind of like a first dibs kind of thing when it comes to BTP. That was kind of discussed a little bit on the Twitter Spaces chat. But I think the way to look at it is we've created a new option, right? Hey, I'm a developer. I want to build on Icon. I'm really good at Java, so I'm going to build on Java, even if I've developed from scratch, just because that's what I'm comfortable with. Or like you say, ooh, I'm good at Java and I'm good at Solidity, and so I have the option to do either or. So the way I see it is creating new options, and just kind of expanding the potential pool of developers who can come over, which I think is ultimately the most important part.
yeah, I agree.
And I think in terms of inflation too, I expect it to be fairly similar. Obviously, there's still staking rewards via you can stake your ICX and get ICE. Um, so there's going to be inflation based on that. But whether there's how if there's separate P reps on ICE, which I kind of assume there would be, what inflation is going to go there. Obviously, there's no CPS to fund, at least at this point in time on ICE. It's all going to still come out of the ICX CPS fund, so there's not necessarily going to be inflation there. So I think it'll be similar, but I don't. There's obviously going to be differences around the edges that make it a bit more unique, I would think.
Yep. Time will tell. The I guess
Yeah,
on an announcement you can only expect so much.
right.
Otherwise, it would be information overload. But it will be interesting. And there was. It was very early addressed by Ricky in the early start of the year in the AMA, going, yep, EVM functionality was a miss there, and we do need to fix this up. So this isn't kind of just a last minute thing they've strapped together. It was very early on admitted, and they've been working in the background through various solutions, and this is what they've landed on. So it is exciting. I already know, speaking to a couple of P reps, they're some of the projects that they were thinking of building, they're pivoting a little bit to plan for this because they know in the background they can speed up their dev time substantially. So already we're starting to see some of the impacts within our own community. Well, people may not be aware, but I'm telling you, this is actual fact. This is what's happening. And Icongraph, I know you're aware of it as well. So it's good. This is a don't let me being critical on a couple of aspects influence any negativity here. It was more, you got to share each side of the coin and think it
Right.
through. But at the same time, the overall sentiment is awesome because that last part, this dev tools part, this is key. Like, all of a sudden you've got say hypothetically 100 crew of devs that are building on Icon various projects. They are creating these tools that aid them in various aspects from scratch when they notice a gap. However, with ICE, all of a sudden, all the tools that are being built on most of the crypto ecosystem blockchains that are in this language, all of a sudden are added to the arsenal. So Yeah. Overall, it is extremely bullish and good news for Icon. I'm very keen to look. The two aspects is for me is I'm very keen to start hearing a bit more detail, and I think we can just quickly lead into this around the private sector because, as you touched on, Icongrapher, the whole idea of the hyperconnected world and its design, the insurance, the hospital, these scenarios came from the need of the government sectors wanting to connect up their various private chains to ensure information isn't being duplicated to make it seamless, right? So I'm very keen on. It's great to see these new visions and all this stuff happening. I'm very keen to see the original vision play out in that private sector as well, and how it's going to come to fruition. And hopefully with Icon 2.0 we'll start seeing a bit more news around that front. But not just that. I think with the Iconist as well. I know we've talked about this a little bit. They have a proposal going through at the moment. I've seen a lot of last minute scrambling from everyone trying to understand why they want the amount of ICX they've asked for, and they've been really good. They've hosted some webinar sessions with all the P reps talking through their plan. I attended yesterday's session, and I keep coming back to this, and I highlighted this to the guys. They're a team of 5 people. For 6 months, they're going to be making content of all kinds, getting it on all kinds of websites. But they're also located in Korea. They're on the ground. And one of the things everyone would have noticed, and I've definitely noticed, is definitely the news coming out of there has dried up, Icon related. Personally, there could be reasons for that. But in this is why I'm so gangbusters about them coming back, because they're on the ground. Even on their tweets, you've probably noticed I put comments asking specific questions. We would like insights on this. And yesterday on the call with Nathan and Drew, and Rob, I actually said this is what's missing in our community, and we need this information back. And Nathan actually made this call out saying we're aware, and this is one of the reasons we were asked. So someone has gone to them and said, this is the news that's lacking. We need this back. And this is why they've come through as a proposal as well to get funding, because they're on the ground. They can deliver these insights to us. It's what we don't have, and I personally want it. I want to know what's going on with most of the government implementations that we keep hearing about. Juju Island, this, that. How is it going? What has been, stats-wise? What's going on? How is it integrated into Icon? Hopefully we start getting these insights from the Iconist, and that's why I feel that proposal is extremely valuable to the Icon ecosystem. Yeah, sorry, I know I shifted there, but I felt we've covered ICE, and I just realized, yes, I got off this great call last night, and it was very positive for me. I took that away thinking the community would really appreciate this, and the guys are nothing but ready to just roll with a whole lot of information and want to hear from the community what they want updates about. So I gave some insights as to a few things that have transpired that we haven't heard anything since. It would be great to get some insights as to what's going on there.
Yeah, and I guess do we want to take that as an opportunity to kind of pivot a little bit and talk about balanced? We've got I think the biggest news as far as balance was concerned was there was I guess you could say a governance discussion. For those who aren't in the loop, there was a proposal kind of floated around as far as altering the way that the inflation of balance tokens would be distributed, and just kind of tweaking those numbers a little bit. There was a that got put out, and then there was a Telegram poll in the Balanced official channel, I believe it was, basically asking, "Hey, do you support this or not?" Balanced then tweeted. The Balanced official account said, "Hey, if we support this, and if there's enough votes for it, we'll implement it." That caused quite a backlash. For a number of understandable reasons. There was a feeling that hey, part of it was, hey, we have these tokens that are supposed to be for governance, but we're making these decisions based on the Telegram poll. The counter to that is, hey, the governance portal, I guess you could say, on Balance itself isn't necessarily ready for on-chain voting yet. So this is kind of a second best attempt at it. There was also kind of, hey, this was put out there with no discussion ahead of time. there wasn't usually on these things, especially in the past when it comes to icon governance. There's a post that goes up. There's a lot of discussion. There's some tweaks. There's some adjustments to kind of make sure the proposal going forward already has a good amount of community support. Obviously, that didn't happen in this case. Altogether, just a lot of frustration and concern. Ultimately, they didn't move forward with it, even though I think it technically passed at least by majority vote on that poll. On that call, and I think prior to that call as well, the team has realized that was a misstep. They did point out that when they had made a prior decision as far as how to allocate the new one of the pools that they added, I can't remember which one it was off the top of my head, but
The
where to pull that.
SICX balance pool.
Yeah, which wasn't on launch, but they added it later and said, hey, where do we got to create rewards for this? Where do we pull them from? They did a Telegram poll. People voted it. Everyone was pretty happy with that, so they felt that was present there, which is understandable. But I think ultimately the bigger issue was that this was such a much larger decision with a lot of different implications there, to where that's where I think a lot of the frustration came from. And like I said, the balance team has agreed that that was, they realized that it was ultimately a misstep, and they've kind of ratcheted up priority on the on-chain governance voting standpoint. So obviously, not the best experience for all sides involved. Ultimately, no harm done from terms of, it's not like they actually went and implemented anything or anything like that. They kind of realized that, okay, maybe the harm, there's a little bit of confidence shaken as far as some people had expressed. But I think ultimately kind of, it was a learning process for everyone, and it kind of created a stronger situation. It showed there was a lot of passion in the community, as Scott alluded to, and we're going to get some governance a little sooner. So ultimately, I think all is well. Everything's moving back in the right direction, but it was certainly something that was major enough where we certainly wanted to discuss it both here and on that Twitter Spaces.
Yeah, look, I was there that night when everything was happening, and most of the community were respectful. I think one thing to remember is it's about how you come across what you want to say. On the night, there was so much happening, and Telegram, it can be hard to keep up. In the background, the team were discussing, actually copying what people were saying and putting it into, the chat where in the background everyone communicates certain updates that we need to get across and ensure everyone's getting the right information. Going, these points are all valid, and having discussions, and we were trying to come back and answer stuff. So at times when things were getting too heated, we were asking people to calm down and be respectful of others. And I think that's ultimately important. It may have come across where, oh, this is how it is, but even the proposal, there was a lot of time spent in drafting up the change, and the core reason of the change was to aid the protocol, not anyone else. But I totally get it. Changes like that should be done on chain, and the team right away acknowledged that. So I think
Yeah,
everyone
and
seems to be focused on. Sorry, everyone seems to be focused on. Oh, they went and did. How could they? No one's not realizing that this is a new protocol. Everyone's learning. The first thing the team did was, as soon as there was feedback, took it on board and pivoted and gone, no, appreciate it, stop, we'll reassess this. It's not what the community wants, and that is ultimately that should be the highlight of this entire process. That it just didn't go ahead regardless of what the community thought. It took everyone's view into account, and yeah, it didn't happen.
yeah, I think the proposal itself had, at least as far as I can tell, fairly universal support. It was just obviously, people don't have an issue with the policy. It was more about the process behind it. So I think, once we get a revamped governance process, we can get that probably, as is that potential proposal, and have a chance for on-chain voting, or at the very least, um, a more robust process for getting that approved or rejected, that makes sure that as much of the community as possible is part of that process.
Yeah, agree with you, Iconographer. And look, on other news as well. Again, with the community call, we had some great little highlights that came out of it. Was we're still tracking at the end of the month a substantial update and I think this will be more around the UI component with price charts and a few of those things coming into play. The rebalancing aspect, Scott said that is tracking well, but probably not in the end of the month update, and a little bit later. But the changes he's envisioned, they are building out, and I believe it is very much doable. Just obviously, any changes like that needs to go through substantial testing if there's variations to the contracts, etc. So it's not going to be, it shouldn't be just thrown as quick as possible out there. It should go through the right protocols. So there was some other stuff, Icongraph, off the top of my head. I'm trying to think. Or was that it? It was major, and the governance. So obviously, as Icongraph called out, given everything that happened, there's a major focus on delivering the governance and proposal features so that the community, and this is just it. The biggest difference would have been if this proposal was put forward and then everyone had a bit of input where objections were noted. However, counter objections were made to explain, for example, why it's going to the Treasury, and then later on votes could be held that everything that went to the Treasury from this date to this date would go back to LP stakers, etc. Because the Treasury is ultimately not the team's Treasury, as in the dev team's Treasury. It's the balance holders Treasury. So all of us that use the platform, what we decide to do with the funds that go in there. So as part of fleshing out these proposals, that's what the governance process will help, and everyone will be able to input and put counterpoints and then finally agree before we put through the proposal. So that has been fast-tracked, and we hope to see it very soon. The other thing, yes, this was the news I was forgetting. Scott did confirm that the fee distribution is on track as promised. So I think that was... How many days has it been, Icongrapher, since Balance launched? Has it been 60 days now?
We are at, I believe, around day 50. So
okay.
It launched on the 25th of April. So around 25th of June, depending on your time zone. So we're about 10 days out as we record this now, assuming I have my date right.
Yeah, no, good. That's exactly. So, that final question right at the end of that community call, I threw to Scott, and he said, yes, we are on track, and no hiccups there. So that's great news. That straight away people start to see, the rewards for being an LP provider, or actually staking your balance, that you're starting to earn those fees. So, yeah, good. Overall, huge learning. And at the end of the day, the team took everything on board, and we're still seeing all the changes. Things are still being built, and community feedback has been taken into account, so that's great. Okay, so next up, I think this is a good one. I actually really like this. ICONFi, they have closed off their initial promotion. That was, if you pre-registered, you got 20% on 7 days on your different deposits. In the background, suggestions have been made that, like Celsius, it would be awesome if when you deposit ETH, BTC, or the other assets, it supports DAI, USDC, the interest, instead of picking it in that coin, you could pick ICX, and you get a little bit more, which is great, because then, it puts buying pressure on the market from a distribution point of view. They've kind of come up with their own unique way, which I thought was cool as well. So they've kicked off a new promotion that if you deposit 1,000 ICX in your IconFi wallet, and then you add ETH, BTC, or a couple of the other coins in there, you'll get a higher interest rate. And so, for example, if there was a 7% interest rate on BTC, if you deposit 1,000 ICX, that 7% is applicable if you lock it up for 180 days. So it halves the days, and you get a little more interest on top of it as well. So, which is in a way similar to paying out interest in ICX, because it requires anyone using the platform to go and, if they don't have ICX, purchase 1,000 ICX and put it in there, earn staking rewards, and get extra interest on the other assets that the platform supports. So I really, it was great to see this promotion. It's building into quite a handy app that it's a password you know, email and password, and then it's pretty simple to use for ICX staking, all the airdrops available on the Icon network, and earning interest on your other crypto assets. So all of a sudden, we're starting to see how it's also benefiting ICX by encouraging people to hold ICX to get additional interest rates.
Yeah, I was about to say, I think there's a lot of people on there who I think a good chunk came over because of Icon, but I think another chunk came over because they had one of those other tokens and they were looking for yield without necessarily wanting to play around with DeFi or something like that. And so say you were a BT had some BTC and you said, oh, I want to get this interest, move it over to IconFi, and maybe you didn't necessarily have an interest in buying ICX for whatever reason. Now you obviously have an incentive to do so. So a nice little marketing pitch both for IconFi itself and for the ICX token as well.
Agree. What do we have next, Tychographer?
I want to briefly call out something Marcus treated. Of course, Marcus John, who's been around Icon for years now. He did take a bit of a hiatus to work on another project, but he came back. He said he's working on basically a way to it's Ethereum based, but plans to integrate down the road with Icon via BTP. Basically, a way to collateralize your NFTs in order to take out loans. So I think this is to a certain extent kind of a I don't want to say obvious use case for NFTs, but just like any other token, whether it's BTC or ICX or anything else, obviously there's value in there. So being able to take that value that you have and take out money against it, it's a pretty good use case for that. So it's nice to see that being built out. And look forward to hopefully that coming online. I won't say soon, but does sound kind of maybe early stages, but nonetheless something that'll happen on Ethereum, and then obviously the benefit of being connected to Icon. So obviously, the best thing would have been if he was building on Icon natively, I would say, but I'd say the second best thing, just based on his loyalty to Icon over the years, the fact that he's building on Ethereum, I know at some point in time, if the project is successful, it'll make its way over to Icon. So certainly a nice little development to see that'll certainly benefit the space. I'm not sure if that's the only project that's of that nature being worked on. Again, just because I think it is a pretty clear use case. But Marcus is a pretty sharp guy and knows a lot of other sharp people. So I'm sure they're going to put together a pretty fine product.
Look, he actually said it's first launching on Ethereum, but it is coming to Icon. And I think he hinted at BTP, so
Yeah, yeah.
waiting for that. So that's good. I think what's cool about this is it's good to see that in the background it hasn't hindered development. Icon 2.0, they've just found another way. Yeah, it may not be, but at least it started off there, and who knows, it may actually now with this announcement, instead of Icon, it ends up on Ice, because from Ethereum to Ice will be easier given everything we've talked about earlier. So yeah, really excited. I'm glad he came out. We knew of something in the background, everyone was wondering where he was, so this is what he's been up to. He's quite passionate and excited about it.
Uh, we got a nice little, I guess, a little surprise marketing, you could say, from Balanced. There is what looks to be kind of an online conference, blockchain, crypto related. It's called Reimagine Game of Chains, being put together. It looks like it's organized, or at least very much heavily sponsored by Mousebelt. Mousebelt is one of the peer ups that is helping Balance build out their product. They obviously have other things going on as well, but they created a little video that's pretty spiffy, I think, as part of a kind of a sponsorship advertisement tied to that Reimagine event that's going on. So that kind of caught my eye because I hadn't seen at least off the top of my head any marketing like that from Balanced. But the fact that it was out there was kind of cool, and so I brought that up on the call yesterday, just kind of saying, hey, was this you guys? Was this is this part of something larger? And Mousebelt kind of did it on their own. Obviously, again, they're tied to Balance, but they weren't part of necessarily the part of the call. But Lisa from Parrot 9 did indicate that there are going to be marketing efforts being ramped up, and that they'll be putting out some information. Sounded relatively soon, as far as, hey, here's what we're doing. Here's here are the different kind of tactics we're taking and everything like that. So obviously, the more use of the platform as far as Balance is concerned is better for Balance, better for Icon. So the fact that there's some proactive marketing going on is certainly encouraging to see, and I'm certainly excited to look at what they have planned. I'm sure the rest of the community is as well.
Yeah, agree. Uh, that was a good one, and the other aspect as well. Not just this, we've seen again that YouTube channel. Another big sponsor, Balance, has been sponsoring that content regularly. They have like 41,000 subscribers, or even more. Am I getting this number mixed up? But or 400. But in the background, we're actually seeing this is the Balance team on its own accord going and starting to sponsor content that will help promote its DAP, which is great to see. I think people aren't realizing it, but it is happening in the background quite a lot. So good to see. Uh, I think I think that about summarizes all the icon news. Do you think we've forgotten anything?
No, I don't think so. I think ICE took up a pretty good amount of everyone's attention, and obviously a good amount of this podcast. But certainly, not a quiet week, even beyond that necessarily. We kind of in the past we've started kind of folding in a bit more broader crypto news, just to kind of create a bit more context as far as kind of how the whole market's going, and maybe kind of potentially how it could trickle down to Icon. We were doing that statement at the front end. Where we're going to go ahead and move it to the back end, which is obviously now, just because I know a lot of you listen to this podcast to hear the Icon news. And so if we start with non-Icon news, you might be a little disappointed. But we do think it's important to kind of highlight a couple of key stories every here and there, just to kind of highlight what's going on. Yeah, I think one of the things that I found kind of most interesting, as far as kind of the, I won't say major news, but little news tidbits out there, is Mark Cuban released a paper on DeFi. I think 3 or 4 days ago. He's kind of one of the, probably, I would say, the most notable people out there who have expressed, the importance of DeFi, and he's kind of been, I would say, the chief DeFi marketer as of late. So he's always, my sense is he's been one of those guys who's always liked to experiment and tinker and kind of be on the cutting edge of things. He's always talked about, or at least relatively recent, talking about how he's trying to figure out how AI works and doing his own little programming and everything like that on learning neural networks and all that other good stuff. So it's nice to see him out there. It looked like someone else potentially might have stumbled upon his actual DeFi wallet, just kind of based on a statement he had made, and then tying that to a transaction that could seem to back up that statement. And so people had a chance to look at what presumably is his wallet, and looked like he was getting pretty deep in there. I can't remember the exact protocols. I think Alchemix was one of them, but he was certainly he wasn't just using Compound and putting a few dollars in there necessarily. I think it looks like he's getting pretty deep into it. So that's certainly kind of cool to see and nice to see, and hopefully he continues being a big proponent for the space, because obviously with more DeFi coming out on Icon, that's going to be, the more people interested in DeFi and more DeFi coming out on Icon, obviously you can see why that'd be a good thing.
Look, he is probably the one person that after I learned hearing him on the Bankless podcast, my respect for him just went up immensely, because he's so rich and he hasn't gotten his lackeys or anyone to go and do a bit of research. He himself dives into this to understand what's going on, and he was schooling David and Ryan on DeFi, some of the protocols, some of the NFT standards, etc. So he's very big, and he gave some great examples on the podcast. He said, and he goes, I have a ton of money in the banks. Sometimes I need to withdraw something from a bank. He goes to a bank. He has to show so many forms of identification, and they'll say, okay, we'll release your funds in 3 days' time, etc., etc. And he finds the entire process so terrible. And he's like, here in DeFi, I'm securing it. I can move my funds instantly here and there without question. I'm getting all this yield. He was right into it. Hearing him talk, you're like, this guy looks like he is born and bred in the crypto world. So huge news on this front. I never doubted he was just using a wallet and sending transactions. He talked about actually learning to code. That's how interested he was in it. If I find something, I need to be able to do it myself, and he's been taking classes on the side to actually build products on Ethereum. So yeah, it's great to have him on board and actually using. I think this is the difference between other people like Elon and this or that. Apart from the shills and whatnot, or holding a stash, has he actually dabbled? Has he actually got a wallet installed? Has he actually sent a transaction to realize the potential here? I put a big question mark on that. So. But Mark Cuban, on the other hand, oh, he's building probably in the background himself as first dApp. Who knows? But good to see. The other aspect, look, I think this was a good one, a good call out. So Bitcoin had an upgrade. Now, this is kind of a big deal since it hasn't had an upgrade for 4 years. It was Taproot. It was voted in. Now, I don't know, IconFi, do you know much about this update?
I know literally nothing about this update.
Neither
So
do
you can.
I. But look, I think the call out was this was the first update in a long time, and given they've tried in the past and things have gotten rejected, this was kind of a big deal. So I just want to call that out. I had tried to look it up, and then it's Bitcoin. As long as it's hovering in the background, I'm happy. I'm not really fussed about anything else about it. So yeah, no, I don't have any more insights onto it apart from it's done over 90% acceptance, which hasn't happened in a long time. So it's good to see, because you have to keep in mind why this hasn't happened is in that 4 years ago is where when all these upgrades they were trying to get things through, people were saying yes, 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 but ultimately was failing, and then that's what caused this huge rift where Roger went and did Bitcoin, the chain split into threes, and we know Bitcoin ABC, Bitcoin Cash, and Bitcoin. So the other two have gone and kept doing whatever and messing up the original vision or enhancing it according to them. But the core of the Bitcoin, the main chain stayed the way it is, and nothing has changed since then for a long time. So this update was a big deal because it didn't create all these splits again. No one thought they were breaking the original vision. Everyone agreed, and this upgrade has happened. So good to see.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, look, I think that's about does it. It covers all the Icon news. Couple of call outs on the ecosystem that impacts Icon, obviously, Bitcoin. Markets, we didn't touch on that, but yes, it is going sideways. We had a glimpse, of perhaps breaking through. Bitcoin needs to break through that, 42,000, but it looks like it's been rejected and bounced down to 38. So let's see what happens there. I've noticed a trend on the weekends. This is always a trend. Things crash. So let's see. But that said, I've noticed a pattern. It happens a few weekends, and then this random weekend, it won't crash. It'll start pumping like crazy. So could it be this weekend? Oh, God, please
We'll
be this
see.
weekend. Cool. Look, again, remember everything we talk, nothing is financial advice. These are just our thoughts and what we are exposed to in the community, and we're just sharing that back to the community. So definitely do your own research in everything we talk about if you were planning on investing in any way, shape, or form. But once again, thank you for listening. Make sure you like and subscribe. Iconographer, have you got any closing words?
No, I think that about covers it. I do want to point out really quick that Scott did indicate that they'd be willing to do kind of more regular Twitter Spaces kind of thing like that. We did have the little IT issues that we're blaming Twitter on, so hopefully those don't come up again. But I think if we can turn this into a regular kind of occurrence where it gives cheap people from the community a chance to directly interact with Scott, and obviously we're asking questions as well. I think that's certainly a nice little form of marketing and community activation that should be helpful. And of course, we'll always continue to try to record those and get those on our feed too, just in case they're if you're in bed when they're happening or you're out and about or whatever it might be, you'll still have a chance to listen.
Yeah, agree. And look, I think with that, we're going to try and make it a weekly thing. And at times, we may not have Scott or Dakey or someone from Icon. It may just be hanging with the community. People can come up, maybe in that forum, because we noticed people weren't wanting to step up and ask questions. But that's the goal of these forums. Like I don't know, I think we should be doing the least amount of talking in the community. This is your kind of voice to get in there and ask some questions directly to people who are
Yeah.
in the foundation.
And I imagine a good chunk of the people that were in there yesterday, it could have been their first time using Spaces, so they might
Totally.
not even have been sure how to ask. So it was mine. So I certainly took me a second to kind of figure it out as well. So that could have been part of it. But yeah, certainly, we want to make sure that these are considered to be and treated as more community based. Obviously, you listen to Fez and I talk to each other plenty of time throughout your week, so a chance for you to, as a community, to ask questions of us, or more importantly, Scott, is what it's all about.
Agree. And I think a great idea that came up from James, he said maybe we'll create a Reddit forum post where some people just don't want to ask, right? They don't want to step up and ask, but they have all these questions. Maybe we can, capture some of those questions from the community in a Reddit post. So look to that. We'll probably tweet it out as well, and people can just go and start throwing some questions in there for the next community chat. And if they don't want to speak up, we'll throw these questions at whoever we have on there. Sometimes it'll just be us chatting to the community. So really looking forward to that. We'll try to change up the times as well. So at times, perhaps I won't be there, Iconographer, you won't be there, given different time zones, but at least it gives a chance for the community in different time zones to interact with what works for them. But let's see how it goes. It was a huge success, I thought. It was actually fantastic. It was probably, compared to the first one, we had 5 times more the amount of people. So I'm calling that something the community agrees with, and a win for the community. So thank you everyone who joined to listen live. It was great. Okay, thanks everyone. Thanks for listening. Chat soon. Take care. I can wrap up.
Yeah.